How's it going? Today I wanted to talk about 5 color commanders and specifically the mana base needed to run them efficiently. So over the last few years, I've made several 5 color commanders that I've really enjoyed. This is kind of a sampling of them. My first was the Sliver Overlord, which is a deck that I still play today. Child of Alara, Eska God of the Tree, which is the most recent. The 5 color option is the Prismatic Bridge, and then the Reaper King, which I've fiddled with for quite a while now, trying to get to work. And with the new introduction of a bunch of changelings and Keldhelm, it's worked a little bit better. But that's beside the point. So let's start talking about mana base. All right, in a 5 color commander, your mana base is probably one of the most important, if not the most important aspect of the deck. The first and most important piece of your mana base that you're going to need to have is fetch lands, which unfortunately is one of the more pricey pieces of mana that you'll have to spend money on. So the fetch lands are so important because they're going to allow you to search your library for any type of mana that you may need to complete your needs. They can search for anything, which is amazing. One fetch land, if done correctly, can search for any color in your deck, or it can give you up to 6 options for dual or shock lands, which is a huge help and a huge fix. I would suggest that anyone running a 5 color deck, if they can afford it, purchase the 10 fetch lands. If money isn't an option for that, there is an alternative. In Mirage, they had a set of fetch lands that came out: the Flooded Plain, Bad River, Rocky Tar Pit, Mountain Valley, and Grasslands. I thought I had some of those to show, but apparently I've lost them over time. These were a budget option. They're not anywhere near as expensive as the other fetch lands. However, the downside to them is they do come into play tapped. So they're a little bit slower than the regular fetch lands. But like I said, it is a budget alternative. These can be purchased for, very, very small amounts of money, whereas the fetch lands can be very expensive. I purchased the Secret Lair Edition fetch lands for $250, which I thought was acceptable, considering to purchase those 5 fetch lands on TCG at the time was about $230, and that was mixed condition. These were brand new, right out of the box. So I thought it was a no-brainer. So the next thing that you're going to want is, if you have the money, dual lands or shock lands. I personally don't have the money for dual lands, being that they're hundreds to thousands of dollars. So I use the shock lands in my 5 color, which I think is acceptable, yet it costs you some life, especially if you're fetching these lands out of your deck. You're looking at 3 life just to get it on the board, which can be expensive. These are a reasonable priced card. They are, the great thing about them is they are fetchable, and you can pay life to bring them into the battlefield untapped. They have gone up and down in price over the last couple of years, being that they were in standard and now they've gone from standard. I think the top end, last time I looked, was Breeding Pool and Watery Grave, and those were about $20-something. And then the cheaper ones, like Temple Garden, were anywhere from $6 to $8. So this is definitely mid-range. It's not as expensive as obviously going for the dual lands, which is the most expensive option and best option if you can afford it, really, because then you don't have to pay that 2 life for each one. But like I said, if you don't have the money for that, this is the better option. I would suggest running 10 of these in your mana base. So at this point, we're at 20 lands, 10 fetch, and 10 dual or shock. Also, I would like to add, before I move on from the shock lands, there was a new option, a more budget option that came out in Keldhelm. They just released the tap dual lands. And this is a 10 set. They're snow lands. All right. These are fetchable dual lands. However, the downside is they're not as fast because they do come into play tapped. All right. If you are still don't have the budget for the shock lands, you don't want to spend $100 on 10 cards, you can get these for pennies on the dollar. They're in the most recent standard set that's out right now, and they are very, very cheap to get a set of 10. So this is an alternate budget option if shock lands are not possible for you. The next part is very basic. And when I say that, I mean it's the basic lands portion. So in a 5-color mana base, you really should have between 9 and 14 basic lands. I personally run 10, 2 of each. These are important because sometimes you're not going to want to fetch for something that's going to cost you life. Sometimes you're going to have an accelerant that will make it so you can only search for basic land, something like Fabled Passage. So you want to have, and these protect you from certain kinds of board wipes that are often come up in Commander that can destroy non-basic lands. So between 9 to 14 of these, like I said, I like to keep 2 of each in mind. And then last but absolutely not least is the option for 3 to 5 colors. So you want to have an option that will allow you mana that will give you all 5 colors, or at least 3 of those. So recently in Ikoria, they came out with the fetchable triomes. So I run all 5 of these in here. They are a slower fetch card. They come into play tapped, but each one of these, like I said, is fetchable, and it taps for 3 mana. I run those, which I think is a very good option. These are very, very economic too. They are $3 to $5 a card. I have the borderless ones here, which were a little bit more expensive, but they're still really reasonably priced. Then we have Command Tower. In a Commander deck, it's an amazing option to have. And then we have the World Tree, which just came out in Keldhelm. Another great card. When this card first came out, a lot of people were saying, well, I'm not going to bother with that because the ability is very, very specific. You have to have these gods to activate it. And I sat back and I was like, well, no. This is a great card because it's a chromatic lantern on a land. All right. And it comes into play tapped. Sure, I get that. But as long as you control 6 or more lands, each land that you control has tap, add 1 mana of any color. Chromatic Lantern is a great card, but in most cases, it's very easy to get rid of being an artifact. Lands are much harder to get rid of. Having this World Tree option in here, giving you that Chromatic Lantern effect on a land is just so beneficial. So the last 6 to 10 cards in your deck should be cards that can produce 3+ color. So you say, well, you know, you've only got 37 cards in here for land. Yeah, that's fine. In a 5-color mana base, you really want to have between 37 and 40 lands. Some people will say 38. Up to you. I haven't had a single problem with 37 lands. It's worked out really well for me. And I will say something too. This mana base can be expensive. I think I've got probably close to $500 or so worth of land here. If you're like me and you're going to be doing multiple 5-color decks, do yourself a favor and buy a few sets of the same color sleeves. I prefer Dragon Shield, and what I've done is all of my 5-color decks are in the same color Dragon Shield sleeves, and I just pull my mana base out. Sometimes when you do that, you have to tweak a little bit. My Child of Alara deck has a lot of green, big green creatures in it. So what I've done is, in that case, when I go to my basics, I've tweaked the basics around a little bit. So I have more green basics in there than I do, obviously, blue or white, because there's not a lot of that in that deck. But save yourself the time and energy and the money, and just get yourself one good 5-color mana base. Keep it in sleeves, like I said, that can be moved around. Next thing I want to talk about, because it's almost just as important as the mana base itself, is accelerants. You need to be able to get those cards. You need to be able to pull them from your deck. I use a pretty standard accelerant. You should have at least 8. Some people will say more than that, maybe 10 to 11. Like I said, I say at least 8. I start with mana ramp, and I go with things like Farseek. Search your library for a plains, island, swamp, mountain card, and put it into your battlefield tapped. Great card for fetch lands. Anything that can be fetched can be pulled with this. Next, Nature's Lore. Nature's Lore, very similar. Search your library for a forest card and put it directly into play. It does not count towards the 1 land per turn limit. Again, pull your fetch lands, pull those triomes. 3 visits. Another one that just came out recently in Commander Legends. Very, very similar to Farseek. Search your library for a forest card, and Nature's Lore for that matter. Search your library for a forest card, put it into the battlefield, and shuffle your library. And the last, mind you, all of those are 2 mana costs. I like to stay in the 2 mana cost range. The one time that I do go up into the 3 is for Cultivate. Cultivate is search your library for 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put them into the battlefield tapped. This is not one of my favorites, yet it is a good card. I like things that I can search for that are fetchable, things that I can search from my dual lands, things that I can search from my triomes with. This does not give you that option. You can only search for basics in here. But of course, basics do have a place in this deck. Then we go into artifacts, and the first artifact that I say should probably go in every commander is the Soul Ring. A 1 mana, any color artifact that produces 2 mana. That's a great ramp spell, and it's just something that feels so good to have in that opening hand when you get it. The next, Fell Warstone. Fell Warstone is a 2 mana rock, and it adds 1 mana to your mana pool. This mana can be any type an opponent can produce. In a 5 mana, 5-color base deck, you're using all the colors. So anything that your opponents can have can be a benefit to you. This is 2 mana for this card. It's a must-have. Then, of course, we have the Chromatic Lantern. Chromatic Lantern, like I said, one of the best accelerants you can get. It's 3 mana. It taps right as it comes out for mana of any color, and it makes it so your lands can produce mana of any color, which is super important in a 5-color deck. And then a new recent one that came out in M21 that I thought was really cool. It has a really high CMC, but it just has so many benefits to it, is the Chromatic Orrery. So Chromatic Orrery is a 7 CMC cost. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. So like Chromatic Lantern, it gives you the ability to tap for just about any color, or any color for that matter. And then automatically when it comes out, you're going to get 5 of that 7 mana back, because this card taps for 5 colorless mana. And That colorless mana could be mana of any color. Also, it's a draw engine, which is great. So you can tap 5 mana in it and draw a card for each color among permanents you control. And, you know, if you have your commander out in a 5 mana, in a 5 color deck, you can easily draw 5 cards right there, which is great. So going back to it, land base, must-haves, fetch lands, all 10 if you can have them, shock lands, or duels. Like I said, duels much more expensive than the shocks, and then even cheaper than that, you have the new fetchable duels that came out in Cold Helm. Then you want 9 to 14 basics. I shy on the lower end, about 10, and then 6 to 10 cards that can give you 3+ color. After that, you should be working with between 8 to 10 or more accelerants, things that are going to boost your mana base up and make it easier for you to get things done. Remember, another big tip, mana bases are very expensive. Find yourself a color that you really like and buy yourself a couple of sets of sleeves in that color. That way you can interchange these cards out and not have to have multiple mana bases that will just destroy your wallet. Well, I hope this was interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's useful and you can actually use this and implement it into your decks. Have a great day.